first order of business is going to be Chief Facette to review the police and dispatch budgets. What have you got to tell us?
All right, I can do it right from here, if that works for everybody. Let me just put my little notes so I know where I'm going.
Do you have any paperwork for us?
There's a,
Oh, you didn't get
No,
that?
I haven't
There's a
grabbed
report
my copy
here.
yet. Missed last meeting and not up to speed.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's read theirs, so it's just that you don't look good.
Oh, okay. What I did with the Board of Selectmen, I thought I'd do the same style I did in the past. My budget's pretty much the same as I've been doing for a long time. Everybody's used to the routine of what I'm doing. I thought I would start out and just sort of have a more of a global view of what's coming on, then I'll sort of migrate myself down to the 2020 budget. But just give you guys a heads up on what's going on and things like that. The big issue I see with the police department coming down the road is there are a lot of talk about training for special officers. Special officers are our part-time officers. They go to a shorter, condensed academy, and we use them in the summertime, and they help augment our department. But there's a push on board by some of the larger departments that they want to eliminate this reserve academy that these officers go to. And they want to have a one universal academy. And that academy be a full-time academy, just like I send all my officers, which is approximately 6 months. The problem that's going to have is that augmenting and bringing people in. Chief Golden's on the committee, so he's going to be speaking on behalf of people who use them. The western part of the state uses them. We use people in that academy for the marina, for environmental. There are a lot of other smaller groups that we use them for. I'm hoping we keep it, but it is something that's in the future, and that, you know, when a future chief comes up and talks to you about what's going on, you sit there and say, I remember Ron saying something about that a few years ago and things like that. It doesn't have an immediate impact on us today. It doesn't change what we're doing tomorrow, but it is a concern, and it's something that we're going to be trying to track and when we bring it up down the road, because I'm not sure how we're in the future would have to address that personnel. We run non-sworn summer employees, but we're limited in scope what we can use them for, and I don't know where that's going to go, but I just wanted to give that out to you, things like that.
How long is the special academy?
It's a very, when I started in 1986, there was no special academy. I had to go take a Brown Book exam. I passed, saying, okay, you're knowledgeable, go at it, and whatever the town, the department wanted to do for training, we did. We have now increased the hours. I think we're around 700 hours. It runs almost like 3 months, and they go 3 nights a week. It's a very intense program. They give us a great product. I think over the past 15 years, you've seen our officers come out, and they do a great job, our part-timers. They really get engaged. They really have a much better foundation than what I had that when I first came on board before I went to the full-time academy. It's all at their own expense. They have to do it all on their own. And the problem is that they keep increasing those hours, and we're fighting for the same people. So Provincetown will put out when they're hiring theirs, so next year we'll put it out a week before them, and then we play the game of trying to steal them and go from there. So it is an interesting, I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I do want to just sort of bring it up to the board just so you guys are aware of it.
so just to be clear, it's a paid position, it's not a volunteer position.
Right.
These are paid positions for
Right.
us.
They're
But they're
seasonal,
part-time.
right?
It's part-time season. We use them at Oyster Fest. We use them at off time to help when we have big events coming on. They're around for the summertime for prisoner watches. So what that does is it allows us to add people to our department. It allows us to see what they can do. We usually hire from the pool. And it's sort of like 2 years of probation. We get a long interview with the person and see if we like them or not. And it really has worked out well. That's how I started my job. Came down in '86 and said, what better place to spend summers on a Cape? And it was all fun, and you guys got stuck with me since then. I don't know who had the better end of the deal.
Now, let me ask you a question. I just came back from Florida, and down there, this is in southeastern Florida, near Boca, they have this thing, and I don't think it's a paid position, maybe there's a minor amount of compensation, where they have local citizens who apparently get some kind of training because they get a car that says they're a citizen's watch or something. They're kind of an auxiliary, but they do like parking related stuff. And they don't have any real power. I think they just maybe they give a ticket or a summons or something like that, but they do help, I think. Have we ever explored having,
We have it, they have neighborhood watch groups.
yeah, it's that kind of
It's
thing.
exactly the same thing, that they put them out and they help augment, they'll do walking patrol in some communities, neighborhoods that sort of have a high crime area and things like that. The problem in Wellfleet is that except for the center of town, which is it's a nice center, we're very rural. So if I was to go out to Ira's house and we set up a neighborhood walk, there's only so many houses within the immediate area, and you sit there and say,
And a lot of them aren't occupied.
and then so you walk around saying, all right, what am I doing? What is the crime rate? What is the goal that they're doing?
Right.
And what ends up happening is people say, if I don't have a real purpose, if I don't see something, we do have emergency responses who come out and help us. We tried using them for the Oyster Fest, but after a while they're saying, unless I'm in the center where all the action's going and involved, the outlying activities get very boring quick, so.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering more like they're talking about doing some, at least I think there's going to be some potential articles having to do with changing the way parking is done downtown, maybe adding meters, maybe trying to generate revenue, and maybe there'd be some role for volunteers to work within that new parking infrastructure, if that made any sense. It's just
Yeah, no,
kind of a question.
Usually you have to find out, people have to have a certain appointed position to write tickets. The beach program does it. They work through Dan's office as the parking clerk. I don't know exactly what the title is supposed to be, but he's the one that sort of gives authority for people to write tickets and parking. But it's a little more cumbersome in how, with the mass laws, I'm not sure how it plays out in Florida.
Sure. Thanks.
All right. As we go down, I did give notice to the Board of Selectmen, and I prepared my 2020 budget in the context that I am looking to retire. I don't know how many people may have heard or not heard about that, but come November, I look to be going on vacation. Finish up my vacation, and I'll be officially gone, and unless they keep me in a part-time position, hopefully I can go on and do something. But I'll be leaving in February. So I'm putting my budget together and things like that. I try to plan for a couple different things. One is, I've been expressing to the Board of Selectmen, I think what they should be looking to do is hire from within. When I took over the spot, it was a seamless transition. I'm trying to do the same thing for my current number 2, Lieutenant Mike Hurley. I think he'd be a good fit. In doing that, that would have a trickle-down effect that I'd be a person. And getting a person trained takes time. And I'm trying to get them to act a little earlier. It seems like it's a long way off for me before I go, but it goes quick. I have an opening that came around July. I am just getting around to getting that person to start the training in April. I'm not gonna get that person out of the academy until about September, October, 6 months. And then I have a 3 months training and things like that after to get them up to speed. I'm bringing them in early, trying to shorten some of the window down. So my hope is that if the budget hasn't prepared with Vivian, that we may be able to bring someone on board a little early, maybe get them into that academy in October. So by the time I'm looking to step out in February, that person may be stepping out of the academy. So either he or she would be able to have a head of the game rolling into the summer. So I have that in the academy, in my budget. I also have in the budget a buyout for my sick time. We've done this in executives before. Marilyn was there. Been here for over 30 years. I've been fortunate I haven't been sick. I have over 300 days that are in the package. It is not paid out at 100%. There's a small percentage of it that's paid out. And I'm just trying to absorb that as a side item within the budget. Because if I have to do that within the budget, if I have to do all that within the 2020 budget, it's just gonna slow the process. So I can just see us now being 2 years out trying to get that position filled. And there's a trickle-down effect about overtime and all that. So that's in my budget. That's what my concern is, and trying to get with that. Other than that, the budget's pretty straightforward. We had to do some adjusting for contracts that were out of whack, and we're trying to get caught up in placement of money. I can go over any lines in particular you may have in it, but overall I have a small increase in the specials line to help cover their costs. I have a small increase in the overtime line, and for the most part, it's pretty much,
And that's to help cover the contract?
yeah, that's a contract that we went a few years
Yep.
and trying to get caught up.
Yeah.
So right now, that's,
So you're trying to already take that into account? and
yeah.
get that
So,
squared away?
yeah, so I've had a chance to sit down with the town's office, I had a chance to sit down with Dan and go over this. I think we're met the needs of what people are looking to do. It's sort of the same standard procedure I've gone through in the past, so I can open any questions or try and clarify anything you may have.
So you don't have anything in here, you're not holding a line, you don't have a line item for another hire, is that correct?
No, we would maintain the 14 officers. With me leaving, there'll be salary left over in my line. The lieutenant would get, I assume, an acting position, interim position, but we'd be able to massage saying, okay, with enough savings here, we'd be able to bring a person in early, absorb it within, right in the budget, and then when I left, we'd be right back at the naturals. I guess the only downside is that it's like, at the last minute, October 1st, he decided not to run away and we're in trouble. But I've been good to my word and everything I've done in planning things along the way, so I don't think that's gonna be too much of a word.
We've already accepted your resignation.
You're done. I gotta go. My Curly has color paint swabs in my office already, trying to change the drapes out and see, I'm like, I'm not dead yet.
That's right, he's measuring for new drapes. So you've been working with Mike Early the way Chief Rosenthal worked?
My goal is that he can step in and things like that. He'll come up with his own style, his own way of,
Sure.
as I mix it up with mine, but he knows the system. He's known to the board, he's known to the members of the FinCom, he's the parking liaison task force, and so I think he's a known commodity and I think he'd be a good fit, but
Should've brought him with you.
he's still in Florida, the truth.
Our plan is to, I'm gonna check with Janet Reinhardt, the chair of the select board, but to bring that to them in February and see how they want to work in the transition, whether they're amenable to doing a, promotion from within, and then we'll set the whole wheels in motion for
So we
this.
still don't know how that's gonna there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can come up with the greatest plan, or I think it's the greatest plan, but they're the appointing authorities, it's their decision to
Right.
make on this, and however they wish to go forward, we
Well, all you can do is put in your recommendation.
let them know what I thought, so this way they have an idea.
So how about dispatch?
Dispatch is a pretty straightforward budget, there really is no changes in there. It is funded at the current contract, because they are expiring at the end of June. So
So they're good through, so this
So this one here
we're
is-
currently working with, it's gonna be a change.
So in there, there are some steps, I think, that some of the dispatchers may receive under the current contract, but we have not adjusted any of the steps yet until,
Right. So-
I know they're in process of meeting with the town administrator, trying to come up with a new contract, and hopefully they can come to an agreement sooner than later, but I remain optimistic.
So right now, it looks like the request is a little bit less than the
Right.
2019 budget, but we anticipate that increasing.
Well,
once
it's a
we-
little less now. What happened was that we had senior people retire. So I have hired people, so the increase ain't gonna be a great increase overall. So we're going from a person hired making, $100 million, now only making $500,000 or something, whatever. 'Cause they haven't been on here and things like that in a long time.
Okay.
Ron's got a way of talking about money.
Either I find out if I exaggerate real high so people don't take me too seriously, or if I exaggerate real low, I understand the concept and they say, oh,
$50,000 doesn't make a difference.
Nice round up.
right now,
You just use a lot of extra
Excellent.
zeros.
They used to my style. They
So, any questions from any members of the committee?
No, that answered my question, because that is what my assumption was when you say when you have a decrease in a budget, it's generally for longevity, for people leaving and.
correct. Yet Cheryl Mulligan,
Smaller.
who's been here since 1984,
Yeah.
she retired in this fiscal year.
Yeah,
Jan Worthington, who hasn't been here as long, but she retired. So my two newest
yeah.
are starting out at the bottom of the
Yeah.
pyramid, and slowly climbing their way in.
Is there any concern about an increase in requirements with the pot shops going in?
It's interesting. I'm trying to track what's going on and happening. Right now, my hope is that more places are coming online because as we have a smaller market, the demand's all focused in that one town. And that's what they felt in the western part of the state. I don't know where we're going to be at. It's going to be interesting to find out how we're going to handle the traffic, how we're going to handle the thing. And hopefully, by the time they come on, if Provincetown does have 2, 3, I think up to 7 they may have interest in, that may help move. So,
Well, ours would be conveniently on the way to Provincetown.
on the way, the number one concern I have to deal with and things like that isn't necessarily the shop, is how we're going to handle what I expect to be the drug driving. You know, people smoking marijuana. Is it going to be a problem? How much is it going to have? What am I going to do with the edibles? Because edibles are out there, and I think kids are getting into the edibles, and that's what I'm hearing is the thing. The marijuana smoking is your adult smoking in your living room. They're really not my worry. They're not my worry now. They haven't been a worry along the way. But what do you do when someone sees, you know, gummy bears that aren't gummy bears, or snacks that aren't snacks, and they get a hold of them? And that's some stuff I'm hearing. But I go, we'll learn, we'll evolve.
Yeah.
As we all know in the news, that we have no true mechanism to try and show a level of alcohol. So if you've been drinking X amount of wines or whiskey.
There's no test to determine the level of THC currently in your system.
So there's a lot of things that people have to figure out on this. Employers have to figure out what are they going to do about employees. They're trying to get at things that if you smoke, employees can limit. My employees can't smoke marijuana because it's still a federal.
Right.
We have a policy that doesn't have it, doesn't allow it, and you know, but what are they going to deal with in 10 years from now, and how that's going to chase out? I don't know.
Apparently they were having to retire a lot of the dogs.
A lot of dogs have been had. What happens with the dogs is that dogs are trained to detect drugs. Dogs don't tell you which drugs they're detecting, so they train to cross from
Right.
marijuana to cocaine. So the dog will come along going, "Hey, look here, there's something there,"
Right.
and they don't know what it is. So if it's detecting a legal drug, then why am I searching your property?
Right.
So the past, I don't know, I say 4 years or so, they've started not training dogs on marijuana. But they had
That's
retired
interesting.
dogs and things like that.
Because
So,
they can't be untrained.
no, you can't.
Well, it feels
That's
like,
interesting.
feels like a straight line. What's that, Lassie?
Yep.
There's cocaine on this property?
Cocaine, oh. Hey, the tail went counterclockwise when spun. You know, it's,
Right.
Have you, on another subject entirely, if we've exhausted that one,
it's up to you guys. I'm here for you.
in the new police station, are you seeing any significant difference in operational costs? Heating, HVAC, anything?
The DPW covers the cost. I don't see the bills and things like that. I know it's efficient. I know that it's a comfortable station. I know that the lights turn themselves on, they turn themselves off, the LED, but I don't see the bills, so I think Mark will have a better sense of
Okay.
it down the road. I know that the flow of the building's a very good flow. I'm very happy with the building.
How's the balance on the HVAC? Is it?
We're doing well. We're still having issues we're getting error codes on the units. So I have my unit guys coming out here on Monday or Tuesday to try and determine why.
They better all be under warranty.
Oh, it is right now. And we have money held in abeyance to compel them, and we have reviews that go before the state to help give us a little strong leverage, but very happy.
All right, good. Anybody have anything else?
The only other thing, and this is completely speculative, so the answer could be no and be totally fine. We started last year to do this longer-term view of the costs associated with the town. So it's sort of pro forma now to say, do you see anything out 2, 3, 4 years that would represent a significant increase in the police budget? I mean, a need to hire 2 or 3 more people or whatever.
The concern I see with the future chief is what happens with the special officer.
Right, which we discussed.
Which I mentioned. So if they start going away, what would happen is that anybody who's currently trained, I expect would maintain their training, and they would say anybody future, so if Ira decided to join us in the force and things like that, he'd have to go to And that's where I'm gonna start seeing it, so Mark Spiegel, who's been around, some of my guys I still see them being around for 3, 4 more years, doing what they're doing, but the pool's gonna start slowly, and then it's a matter of how do we address.
But that's if and only if this happens.
Correct.
You said it's being discussed on a state level, correct?
State level, yeah, it's not our control, it is a state level. I just know that people who are in charge of the committee are sort of pushing this, and they necessarily have large departments. And we're trying to make sure that the smaller departments are represented. I know, like I said, Jim Golden is part of the committee.
I don't know who that is.
Provincetown Police Chief.
Okay.
So they have they hire more part-timers than we do.
Yeah.
So we run a very similar shop, and we'll see how that flows out.
Is there any citizen input into this, or it's completely?
Right now, it's early on, so we don't know. Every time I go to a meeting, I keep hearing it brought up, and I'm like,
Let's hope like all
Yep.
things government, anything that happens
we
slowly.
we don't move fast.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Who is pushing this?
Who's pushing it?
Yeah.
I have a chief up in Natick. So that's what's going on. Which kills me because one of our officers who was part-time here is a grade officer up in his neighborhood and things like that, working for him now, and he's rising the cream of the crop up there and things like that. So
What's the motivation behind it?
well, they don't use part-timers at all. They see them as a liability. Some of the towns don't like to use them because they can get into, and I agree. And a few years back, some of them have gotten into some sort of trouble, and we made news because some of them were more political in appointing rather than purpose.
Got it.
And so I think that's what they've been targeted, not and notarized. We every so often come across it, but I think ours are well vetted. I said, if you're having a problem, have a problem. We have a problem with police getting in trouble who are academy trained.
Right.
We are human, and we have our own frailties amongst our profession, as we amongst the fire profession, town administrators, citizens, doctor. So that doesn't necessarily remove or say they won't get into trouble, but
But it's one of those cases, it sounds like one of those cases, well, we don't use them, so let's get rid of it.
yeah. But some places have harbor masters that do a lot more law enforcement
Right.
role.
Yeah.
We usually take care of the law enforcement role at our harbor. Mike Flanagan doesn't do a law enforcement, he does more of administrative enforcement, monitors, does all that, but not too long, but some do. And what they do is they'll send them to the Reserve Academy,
Right.
so they give them a basics to know what to do, to identify it. Shellfish, some have more armed.
Right.
I don't think that's what we need for us. I think our model works. But those are a lot of places that have them.
Right. It
And,
just seems somewhat unfair that,
but
that the large departments would want to dictate what
it's not done
everybody else
yet.
can do, so.
We haven't given up on it yet.
Right.
It's roared its head a few years ago, and they moved on to something else quickly, so maybe there'll be another crisis somewhere else or something not involving me.
Right.
That,
I'll find something better to discuss.
and you say,
All right, so that's the only thing you think might be on the
yeah,
horizon?
no, I think, like I said, the station's up and running, everything like that, so I don't see any big ticket items. It's just following what they're doing with cars and things like that. I don't know. I hear there's a push.
Do you ever get any pressure to, I know this applies somewhat to the fire department, to think about regionalizing the police departments at all?
Every so often it does come up. Every so often they think about it. I don't see it happening in Wellfleet. Every so often they discuss. People like to have a knowledge of what's going on, who their officers are, the whole community thing. I know when we had a few years back an officer that didn't fit our comfort level here, and it caused a turmoil within the town and trying to.
This was like 15 years ago.
No, this was like 6 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
another one? Yeah,
That I dealt with
I
in
guess
the-
I missed that one.
Yeah, well, we take care of it and things like that, but
Right.
I just, people like to have a comfort level of who is coming and things like that, and how we try to enforce our laws may not necessarily be how we enforce elsewhere. Parking the wrong way on Main Street. You know, it's sort of a local
Right.
thing.
It's delightful to freak out one's friends with that when they come to visit. that's not legal. Why is the sign printed, facing this direction?
I can imagine though, like with the pod administration, that there might be some benefit in at least having consistent law enforcement across several towns.
Well, I think on some things there are a lot of things that we have to do that we maintain. Domestic violence is considered a certain crime that, you know, I'm not allowed to smack a lady in Wellfleet, but Eastham says it's okay. You know, there's universal how we handle, but some of the things are more the quality of life issue. Drunk driving is not allowed. You know, whether you're drinking in Wellfleet, drinking somewhere else, we're all looking to enforce the laws the same way. It just comes down to some of the smaller things, saying, what do you do? How are you going to handle this? And those are the things that usually get
A
people.
certain amount of local discretion.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, a few years ago, I know that there was an initiative where the towns the police officers might cross town lines on motor vehicle, unmoving vehicle violations. Is that still going on? Or
Still going on. We still haven't been able to resolve it. We have a mutual aid agreement that covers our officers from Provincetown to Eastham. So we have signed off on it. So if an officer of mine happens to be getting gas in Eastham and they see something, they are fully empowered to act, whether it be a Provincetown officer and things like that. We're meeting in 2 weeks and we think we finally got all the different chiefs to agree. I had about 3 holdout, and I think we're gonna get this agreement to cover the whole Cape. So if an officer is doing a training, if something's happening and they're in Harwich, they're empowered to do what they have to do, so we don't let jurisdiction get into the way. It still falls back to the host town where the offense is, they handle it, they're their primary.
Right,
But we should be a good witness and we should be able to act and see something
right.
and go from there.
Okay. Good to know. All right. I think that covers it. Anybody? All right, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
So this will be the last time you come in for a budget meeting, won't it?
I don't see anything happening special and something goes on in the fall. It's like, how many do you want me to do? I've done probably 15 of them or something. I've been doing the chief's job for about 10 years. I've been doing the budget since as a lieutenant.
Yeah, you used to come in with the chief or
He used to have an empty folder. He used to sit there and sit and go.
various times.
Well, it's all gone now and things like that. I sit there and like,
Lieutenant Hurley's gonna tell stories about you.
that's all right. But I'm gone. What are you gonna do now? You sit there and say,
You've never had an empty folder to my knowledge. The time that we've worked together.
Yeah. All right. All right, Chief Polly, you're up.
Thank you. Much like Chief has said, I'd kind of like to give you kind of a top-down version, and pretty much my discussion, I hope, will go along with the same direction as last month with the board. Board Selectmen. Again, I'd like to wish Chief Fassett a very long and happy retirement. We've had an excellent working relationship, and the departments have worked well together long before I became chief, and long before he became chief. So he will be missed.
You better come visit.
hopefully they keep me working part-time. Maybe it'll be on the summer, I don't know. Maybe the fall, summer season.
Come back and oyster.
Yeah.
Your wife would like you working in the summer.
Yeah.
Unlike Chief Fassett, when I decide to go, I'm gone. Just so everyone knows.
Okay.
Yeah, but that, no offense to the town, it's just I have plans. So, give you some background. Our call volume for finishing up for 2018 is up about 10% over 2017. We had done over 752 EMS rescue calls as of the end of November, and another 443 fire calls. So again, we're up about somewhere between 10 and 11%. We currently have myself, our full-time administrative assistant, and 11 firefighter paramedics full-time. We have 9 active on-call people. This is the concern, this is my immediate concern. Out of the 9 active call people, 8 are assigned to one of 4 groups. We work a 4-group system. to cover 168 hours of coverage for 24 times 7. So out of the 4 groups, we have 2 full-time people on a group, and one group now with 1 full-time person, but then 2 call people assigned to that group. So that allows the first ambulance to go out with 2 paramedics as a minimum, and 2 call people coming in, 2 call EMTs. And that's how that works on a nightly rollout, if you will, from 6 p.m. to 7 the next morning. We're authorized for up to 16 call people. Right now we're down to 9, and I've had no viable applications come in the last year.
Didn't we take some of the budget for the 16, didn't we cut that number down?
We cut that number down to accommodate 1 person, 1 new full-time person. That was at the special town meeting this past fall. And what that did is that allowed me to assign 1 new soon-to-be medic to a full-time group. So we have 3 groups with 2 full-time people, and the last group with 3 full-time people.
Okay.
So that's helped a little, but it's just really been a drop in the bucket.
So are we still technically authorized for 16?
Well, we're authorized for 16 by department policy, but we're not authorized by funding.
So what are we funded for?
We are funded for, right now with call stipends, we are funded for 11.
Okay.
Is roughly is 11 in terms of that's call stipends, that is training, hourly callback, and then what we call also funding for what I call trips to the hospital. Every time a call member goes to the hospital on the ambulance with making the transport, they're given a stipend per call. So that covers all of that, plus their uniforms, their training, and whatever overtime they may occur. My immediate concern is that out of the 9 active call people, we have 2 that are currently in paramedic school, and they will be done that paramedic formal training probably sometime around the end of June. They will do about 2 to 3 months of hospital time, and then by September they'll be ready to test, if not sooner. And I know that those 2 people will be hired somewhere. So we're going to lose 2 call people right away to other departments, and they're both, one is a resident of the town, the other is a resident of Eastham. And then I have another call person who's on a list, he's a firefighter EMT. And then I anticipate probably in the next, again, trying to give you an 18-month picture, because from now until July 1 is roughly 6 months, and then the budget goes out another 12 months. So I anticipate a retirement or a resignation of 2 more call people, which will bring us down to 4 to 5 people. And that at that point, if we lose 2, we're not going to be able to function. Never mind 4 or 5. Because what happens if you lose 2, now you go from 2 people on a group to a 3 squad system, because you have to take 6 or 8 people and divide that to coverage. So now instead of having 2 on a group, you have a squad of 2, and that what that does is that requires you to schedule that squad more. So instead of being on call 2 nights a week, they're on call 3 nights a week. We had to do that briefly for about 90 days this past winter when we had some people in the academy. I should say the winter of 2017 to 18. And fortunately it didn't happen in the summertime, because it just wouldn't have worked. When you're going out 1 or 2 nights a week and you have a full-time job and you're out taking the transports to the hospital of 2.5 hours each time in the wintertime, I'm not trying to paint a picture of gloom and doom, but it's just not a sustainable model anymore. And unless we have a huge influx of call people that are trained as EMTs or firefighter EMTs, which we haven't had, we are in a really, really difficult, precarious situation.
Right.
And I just want to finish up on one thing on that, because this kind of really illustrates, I think, the bigger issue. Back when several of my full-timers were hired 7 or 8, 9, 10 years ago, there was a list that you had to test through the Barnstable County Chiefs, which we still have that process, to hire for maybe 20 positions across all Cape Cod, you had 100 to 110 people vying for those positions. That's what the interest was back then, 8, 10, 12 years ago. Now what we have in the 2017 paramedic class across Cape Cod, there were 19 students and 15 just completed. In the current class, which is going on, there are 10 students in the 2018 class, 2 of which are Wellfleet students. And in December of 18, just December of 18, so now let's say we have 10 medics coming across certified in the next 4 to 6 months. In December of 18, Dennis had 6 openings. Dennis Fire, Barnstable Fire had 1, Yarmouth Fire had 1+, Orleans had at least 1, Brewster had 1, and Harwich had 2. And we're not talking the Truro, the Wellfleets, the East Hams of the world. These are the major departments. We need to do something differently, and we need to do it now. And that's my summary of.
So what would you do, Chief, if you really could have your way? What would you do to solve this problem?
What I would do is to ask the town to fund 3 more positions immediately at the next town meeting. We would, I believe, have a good chance of, what's going to happen, Ira, is that we're going to lose those 2 people, and no one's guaranteed a job in this world. But those 2 paramedic students are going to be picked up just like that, and we're not going to get them back.
Is that because we're not?
That's part of it's the payroll, part of it's the pay, which the town administrator and I are working on. But part of it is that our pay is not as competitive as it could be. The cost of living in Wellfleet, as we all know, is higher on the Outer Cape. I shouldn't just say Wellfleet, but the Outer Cape. And then we have these other departments that just have, the bigger organizations, that they are busier places. Most people in this job like to be active. They like to be out doing things. So there's the whole attraction for a bigger department, more opportunities, more chances to specialize. What I found is since I've been here at least, the people that we've hired for the most part have come from the Outer Cape. They like this area, they love this area, they have roots here, they've grown up here, they've either inherited property here or they've bought property from family members, and they want to be here. And we're losing that, just like a lot of organizations and a lot of employers. But we're really losing it to a point where, because this is such a specialized field, much as like law enforcement, or the medical field is so specialized that we lose these folks, and the chances of us replacing them are very, very slim. So to answer your question, if I had my way, if I was able to convince the community to fund 3 more full-time positions, at least we'd be able to maintain 2 more medics, and probably another EMT, and at least that would give us the stopgap, I think, that we can continue to maintain the service for the next few years if everything else stays the same. That we're in a position to be able to maintain the level of service. And I know Janet and I have had these discussions. We do have other folks that are going to be retiring out. The other 4 or 5 members of the department that are in their mid to late 50s will be retiring out. And those are very active people, if you will, because of their time and service to the community. They're also paid at a little bit higher rate. That I anticipate that we would shift again some of that call people if we can't find call members, if we can't find people that are willing to work for the town on a part-time basis, just like a reserve officer, if you will, that we would shift that money into, again, working towards filling those additional full-time positions if they're needed. But we're just at a point now, we're really at the cutting edge where something has to change. And I mention this every time that Dan and I get together, and the last thing I want to have to do is go to town meeting with my hat in my hand and say, okay, folks, here I am again. But unfortunately, it's just reality. And if I don't do that, then I don't, I'm not providing the service that the town expects to have.
You shouldn't have to do that. Your selectmen should do that.
Well, I say, but I have to pitch it. I have to pitch it, and I'm part of the solution, as I hope to be. So, Dan and I have had some general discussions as to maybe some ways to, look at this. You're hearing the same thing that I told the selectmen last month. So there's nothing here that's new. But we're really at a point where we need to do something different because this model just doesn't serve the town.
Okay, is Eastham and Truro having the same problem?
Eastham doesn't have a call force anymore. About 15 years ago or so, they just basically, when they weren't getting call folks, like kind of where we are now, they just took some of their call folks and they transitioned them to full-time people. And then last year they got a SAFER grant and they funded 4 more full-time positions. So they now have 5 people on shift. I'm trying to get us to a point where we have 3 people on shift. And even that, is not ideal by any stretch of imagination, but it provides the level of service that we're providing now. And as I told my department members last week at a meeting, there's nothing more that I'd love to have as a very vibrant 16-member strong call force. We haven't had that now in 5 years, and it just continues to diminish. So it's just not reality
Are
anymore.
those SAFER grants still available?
They're available. They're highly competitive.
I see.
There's only a window of time that you can compete for them, and that's it's a 30-day time frame. And then what they do is they fund the startup cost of a position or X number of positions.
Yes, and Wellfix rejected that in the past.
In the past, the philosophy has been not to fund new positions with limited one-time funding. I know that's been the past.
Chief, in your experience, I'm sorry.
No, I'm
are you
finished.
done? In your experience with networking with other chiefs and people in your position, back to kind of the regionalization question, and I think you were going there, so to kind of piggyback on that. So Eastham isn't having the problem. Is Wellfleet, is there an opportunity to regionalize some call people so they may take a shift in Wellfleet and then they may take a shift in Truro?
We're kind of doing that now, but what we're doing is...
But you're doing it as a mutual aid.
We're not only
Or is that-
running as mutual aid, but we're competing for the same small group of people.
Okay.
So, I've had call people that'll do a shift in Truro, but that means that they're not available for that
For
second
that
ambulance
call.
call in
Yeah.
Wellfleet because they're on shift in Truro and they're committed to the Truro schedule.
So I'm just thinking in kind of in a solution where somebody doesn't want to be part-time because they need to have a full-time opportunity to earn the income to live in these places, that by sharing a community person may work,
Yeah.
but then you would have to, come together and make sure that your scheduling.
The scheduling works, and I'm not opposed to that. It's just that right now we have such a limited pool to draw from.
Yeah,
But I'm all for regionalization. I think that the Outer Cape is very ripe for regionalization, and but that's not going to solve our immediate problem. At least from the fire service standpoint. I can't say that for the police service. But from the fire service standpoint, I think Truro and Wellfleet are a natural match because of demographics, the types of community, lots of things. Having said that, we approached the Truro Board of Selectmen a couple years back and it was rejected. For the fire chief in Wellfleet to serve both towns, to start that out as let's try it for 3 years and see how it goes. And it was rejected. That's fine, that's their decision. But, again, it doesn't solve what we're facing now.
kind of seems like, it just seems with the number of departments that seem to be facing this, that there should be some way to with nobody having to
It's
reinvent the wheel.
political. It's a political decision. I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, if I could ask one more question, are you getting any response from these issues from the high schools, the tech school, Cape Cod Community College? Are they working from within to build a public service arm for the Cape Towns?
I could say that, for years, Cape Cod Community College ran a good, solid paramedic program. And 2 years ago, they stopped doing that.
Really?
And I would say that it's probably a politically driven decision, not a need-based decision. So that forced a lot of the folks to either give up on their paramedic training or go off Cape. Well, again, paramedics are needed everywhere in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, if I'm going to take my paramedic training in Pembroke and I have an opportunity to work on the South Shore somewhere or central part of the Commonwealth, that's where I'm gonna go, unless something draws me back to the Cape. So, it's like a perfect storm with a very, very dire
Yeah.
consequences, is where we're at.
If I just in personal knowledge, something I don't mean to. We find that employees now, the different generations, the people who are staying for 30 years, like I came on board, aren't saying the mindset anymore. People are much more, I'll do this here for a little while, I'll go over here. They're more inclined to bounce around. So Tom Ferrero, who came on board and stayed here, and he did his 30 years here, and I did my, it's a different dynamic now that's out there right now. The draw into public safety isn't necessarily the same thing. And it's even with the big agency. State police is just about to kick off an academy class. Very desired position. People go for it. They go out, they send out the letters, they do background investigation on people that do it. On the day they go to do the orientation, 40 people didn't show.
Yeah.
So we're fighting in the small area, trying to draw people. The fire chief will put out an application that says, I have 8 people that applied, or whatever the numbers are that are applying. And I sit here and say, all right, I have so many applying. Sometimes it's hard to fill the positions that we have. And when we have them, I'm not as sure how long I'm gonna have that person for, because they get drawn into the romanticism of, I'm gonna fight more fires in a bigger area, or I wanna deal with, whether it be more violent crimes or more activity, or I wanna, where I sit here and little podunk and sit here and go, we're our own charm in our own way, but we have a hard time competing with, some places that are going out to overdoses every night, multiple nights in time, and
No, you're absolutely right, Chief.
it's universal, and so it's not us, it's the state police. I talk to, people in Boston and larger areas at civil service. I'm so happy we don't have it. I just listen to my compadres who have it, and they sit there and say, we've exhausted the list, and we know that the list ain't coming down for 2 years, and we don't know what we're gonna do. So it's a very difficult thing that we're trying to deal with. And
So let me ask you a question. How, if we, you said we have 8
We have,
call
we,
members at the moment?
we have 9 active people.
And we're funded for 11.
We're funded for 11.
And you're sure that we're gonna lose 2 of those 9, so we would have 7. First of all, would your recommendation be to phase out the call members altogether?
No, I don't want to do that, because I think, excuse me, again, my vibrant hope would be to have a viable call force. Now maybe that call force is only 4 or 5 people anymore as opposed to 16, but there's still value to that if they're active and they're participating. So I don't want to be the chief that phases out the call force for lots of reasons, because I think there's still value there. But we have to transition. If you look at the history of the department, the first 2 full-timers were Alan Height and Tom Ferreira. And then we had, 30 call people. And that was in like 1980, 1982. And now we're
30 years.
the pendulum has gone way back around where we have 11 full-time people, not including myself, I'd be 12, okay? And now we're down to 9 active call people. So you can see how the transition is. So again, I've had some thoughts of my own, and Dan and I have run some things back and forth, but we haven't made any clear decisions as to how are we gonna pay for this? Can we take a little bit more money out of the call force this year? Yes. Will that fund a position? Probably not, no. But would it fund part of a position? Possibly. There are things, and I'd really like to, we know that an override, again, do we go that route? Do we do some combination of an override for one and maybe be able to fund 1.5 or 2 out of some other incomes? I don't know.
Just thinking a little bit out of the box here, we're losing younger people to larger departments. Would we be able to use some of that money to perhaps fund a little bit more expensive, more like Okay, so the bigger departments are poaching our young people, how about we start poaching their older people? Who might be willing to slow down?
Because those folks, in general, those departments pay more than we do. They already have their time in terms of more vacation time, more sick time, more time on the books, more seniority. So there's not a real draw for them to come this way.
There's no way to bring somebody from another department and have them keep some of those.
Not
They have to come in at entry level, we can't bring them in at a higher level, is that correct?
That's correct. We have to work within the bargaining agreements.
Uh-huh.
We have had, in the time I've been here, we've had one or two folks that have been out of the fire service, decide to want to come back in. And, they applied for full-time positions, and as we were going through the process, they were already scooped up by other departments. So what you're saying, I think, has some possibility here and there, but it's, again, it's catch as catch can.
Right.
Yeah,
We're negotiating right now with the firefighters union.
Yes.
And one of the key things we're trying to do in their new contract is make them competitive with the surrounding communities
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
So that if somebody's gonna leave, it's not because we're not paying them enough. We wanna be competitive with the other communities.
Right.
They still may leave if they wanna go where the action is and stuff like that, but we don't want it to be purely just, we didn't
Financial.
pay enough to hold on to them, so.
Yeah.
Maybe once we have gummy bears, there'll be more action.
Well, I was going to mention, because, thinking about Jeff's question earlier, my brothers on this side on my left side may have not seen as much. We've started to see an increase in those types of calls.
Actual
Overdoses, one night in one house. And again, this doesn't happen all the time, but I never would have believed it unless I saw it. One night in one house this spring, we had 3 adults who had just tried edibles for their first time, and they tied up 3 paramedic ambulances over the course of 6 hours.
I heard about this.
so I was just gonna,
For a different
going back
line.
on that, I was just gonna ask, with the 10% increase that you've seen year over year, is there a specific area where you can attribute that to? Not that that is it,
Yeah.
but that kind of leads into my,
I-
what do you think the spike is leaning towards?
I can't say that is it at all, but
No, I
it's
didn't
certainly.
imply that that was
Yeah,
it, I
no,
just
I
kind
understand,
of wanted to
Catherine,
see
yeah.
if you could,
But I think we're
I
gonna.
don't,
I think we're going to see a little bit more of that type of activity. Just because, again, what happens is people do this in the privacy of their own home,
Right.
and then all of a sudden they're not feeling well, and they have a medical emergency, or they're having an issue, and they call us, and we're very empathetic to that. And we want you to call us because, if your heart's racing, twice as much as it should be, or all of a sudden, you pass out, and your partner or spouse or whomever, please do call us because we want to make sure that we can provide you the medical care that we need to. So again, while you may not see it initially on the streets, if you will, we're going to see it a little bit more in the privacy of your own home or residence or wherever you happen to
I'm
be.
hoping the commercially available edibles are gonna come with dosing instructions, because
Well-
my understanding was that this was a home brew.
What happens is that people who smoke marijuana usually get an effect from marijuana relatively quickly.
Right.
If you drink a whiskey, you
Yeah.
drink a wine,
And
you
the
start
others
to
take
learn.
a lot longer.
You eat edibles, and you're like, and you sit there and pop 3 or 4 more because there's nothing,
Right.
and they have a sweetness to them. And all of a sudden, by the time it does kick in,
Yep.
whether it be a 30-minute
Right.
onset for it, you're not kicking in at one dosage, you're kicking in at a higher dosage.
And we're learning a lot about this as we've, in the last year. The potency is much stronger
Yeah.
with the manufactured material, if you will, manufactured. And things are probably, a lot of it's coming from out of state. And because, again, as the chief mentioned, someone who has a positive long-time history of smoking marijuana now is trying something different and expecting the same results, but the results come slower, but when they come, they hit you much harder. And that's, I think, just part of the public education part of it.
This
You know?
ain't your grandfather's
No, and
marijuana. They think back on what's going.
The stuff that was around when I was in high school.
No, this stuff is
This is-
much more potential,
Even
much more.
even the stuff you're smoking now is
Oh,
much
it is
stronger.
It is much different. And again, the town voted for it. People you know, I don't wanna make it sound like it's the worst demon out there, right?
Right.
But there are things that are gonna have to deal with it. We also think there's an undercurrent of things that overdoses. I believe our numbers for responding to overdoses is down than what we had in the past. I don't believe that we're not having them. I do believe that people are doing Narcan and supplying opiate overdoses
Right.
on their own, that Narcan's available. So instead of calling the medics, instead of calling us, I will give Rich his Narcan, bring him back, and, okay, and we never call. And I think there's an underground of that going
And I believe
on.
that to be true also.
So it's just,
Is that a good thing or a bad
I
thing?
think it's a bad thing,
I think that's a bad thing.
because what happens is that Narcan, you take so much opiate on you, and you have so much running around inside of you. You take Narcan will come in and remove a percentage of that from the different senses, and it only takes so much. So as soon as you take the Narcan, you have more opiate on board, it attacks. We are doing multiple issuing of Narcan to people. We'll go out and give a Narcan 1-2 doses, they'll put them in the ambulance, en route to the hospital, they'll continue to give them more Narcan to take all the stuff. Also what happens is that people have Narcan on board, they have a dose, I feel good, overdose, I come along, and Rich probably gives me Narcan, so I'm not feeling as good anymore.
Yeah,
I already have so much on board, I go out and add more
right.
to the system. So again, talk about edibles, same thing. It's,
And that's basically the same.
and all of a sudden,
philosophy.
there's a lot floating around on board, and that's why we passed a law saying that if the police are involved in issuing Narcan, you're going to a hospital. And we have the
Yeah.
authority to take you. And so when Rich Paul says, no, I'm good, leave me alone, I go, no, you're not, you're going. And we convince him to go, we're diabetic, we give you sugar, I don't want to go to the hospital, come on, no, all right, we'll leave you. You know what, we don't force you, but Narcan and opiates are a little different.
It's off of this subject, but back, it seems from what I'm hearing, what we should be planning for strategically is probably a delta of at least one more person for the next 2 or 3 years on the fire, in the fire department.
Well,
One
I,
more per year, you're saying, or one more?
Whether,
Adding an extra.
that we will be adding, it may be like one per year as
Right.
opposed to,
I just wanted to
to try to
clarify.
get, but what I'm hearing from you is, unless we can figure out a way to broaden the interest of the public and be part of a call service, that really we've got to be able to increase the number, just to be able to have, minimal service support.
I would agree with you, Jeff. My only comment on that is and I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I see the need for us in the first year to do 2 right away, to hit that position, that point, with the fact that, we're gonna be able to hopefully maintain 2 very, very active, well-trained people. And then if we end up losing 2 more, we're still behind the 8 ball, if you will, but we're not as far behind the 8 ball as we were. So, a 2-1 and 1-1 or something to that, I think would put us in a better position strategically to maintain the level of service that we need to maintain.
One thought in terms of regionalization is, I don't know if it's helpful, but something to think about, and that is, as we're presenting this at town meeting, to have a direct comparison between Eastham and Wellfleet. We're 2 comparable, we're smaller, they're gonna be bigger than us.
Yeah.
But at least as providing a look at what a baseline and what we should be, it might help in terms of an understanding among the populace, what we have, because it really sounds like what I'm hearing is, because this comes up like at every one, and you can anticipate, and I think it's just something strategically we have to be looking at to say, this is an area where we have, requirements and deficiencies.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Dan, you've seen the selectmen go over this. They know this. They've heard Chief Pauly. They also hear the Shellfish Constable ask for more personnel. So where is there a balance of saying what's more important personnel for the town? Growing the Shellfish Department personnel or public safety. I mean, I'm just curious about what they are saying.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know that I've had that much feedback from them, but we're going to push it more with them. I'm going to actually recommend that we have an article on the warrant to add staff. It's, shellfish is also public safety when you talk about going in and doing inspections and
Okay,
Vibrio,
fair
so
enough.
there is that. But I think when you talk about police and fire, I don't ever want somebody to come back to me afterwards and say, well, why didn't you ask for people if you didn't have enough? Because we weren't able to react to an accident or an overdose or something like that. So public safety, police and fire is not something we can mess around with.
And my last question, I promise, where does mutual aid fail? I mean, mutual aid, it seems to me that nobody has ever really, I don't remember ever anybody really dying or something terrible happening because you couldn't summon the help. So as long as you keep summoning the help, then it doesn't feel like there's an emergency to people.
I think that's kind of a two-part question, or I have a two-part answer to that question. First of all, mutual aid always seems to come through. Now, I never thought in my career here, on multiple times, I'd see a Hyannis ambulance sitting in Wellfleet Fire Station.
You never thought you'd
I never
that?
see that. I never thought I'd see that. When you think of the number of ambulances between town of Barnstable and Wellfleet, Brewster has 3, Harwich has 3, Yarmouth has 4, Dennis has 4, Chatham has 2 or 3, Eastham has 2. Twice in the last year, I've had a Hyannis ambulance sitting in Wellfleet, and I never thought I would see that in my career. And one of those times was off-peak. It was, not in the
Not what you would expect.
not in the heat of the summer, if you will. So mutual aid always comes through. The problem, though, is that you may be waiting, and there are times that you're waiting 15, 18, 20 minutes for an ambulance, because these ambulances are coming and going so many different places and so many different time frames that, it's not uncommon that I'm on the phone with the chief in Provincetown, and there is an ambulance to be found from Orleans to Provincetown, and we're trying to get them to backfill this way. But again, Dennis, Yarmouth, Brewster are all busy. Again, it's just reality, and so you really have to be in a position to take care of your own first. Trying to be politically correct when I say that, but in the past you've heard Chief Silverman say, we need to be able to get 2 ambulances out on the road, and I've said the same thing. Now we're at a point where if these numbers continue to decrease in terms of availability to call people, we're going to struggle to have 1 ambulance adequately staffed on the road. Never mind 2. Now again, sometimes these changes, like last night I had 3 call people come out. Now that was wonderful, and every time that happens I thank the Lord up above. But that's not consistent, and it's not, something you can count on, I guess is what I'm saying.
But you have to be careful about being an unfair burden on your neighboring thing. How many times can I go to your house and ask for sugar for my coffee? And you sit there and say,
Well, that's another interesting question. I know you pay them back.
no.
No.
Well, we have reciprocal agreements.
Reciprocal agreements.
So basically, it's about, I think we end up, and we've got the numbers, but just off the top of my mind of doing my monthly reports, which you'll have mine tomorrow, by the way. I'm 3 days late. We tend to use a little bit more, receive a little bit more than we give on the EMS side. On the fire side, we tend to give a little bit more than we receive, which kind of tells me something. And again, in the summertime, we'll tend to receive a little bit more than we give. But it generally pretty much evens out. And I say even out if we're, if we're off by 12 or 13 calls in a year, 1 call a month, then on an average, then I call that a pretty much square deal. And I think most chiefs feel that same way. We're not at a point where we're saying, hey, but that has happened in the past on the Cape where, other departments or other boards of selectmen have gone to another town's board of selectmen and say, you better start thinking about stepping up because we want to help you, but, we can't always do that. consistently.
Thinking outside of the box. Outside, could you-
Well,
I-
I have a question, but I can wait.
Everybody's gonna get to know me, I just step on
Let me just step in here for just a moment and just
Yeah.
say, we've been talking to Chief Polly for half an hour now. We haven't covered the actual fiscal year 2020 budget yet, so if you could make this quick.
Okay. Not to minimize the professionalism in the training that you go through, is there an opportunity in the summer to take residing medical professionals that are here that would be part of the on-call team, not necessarily for an on-call, but as a third backstop, and do it in a volunteer system where they can maybe say, like, let's take some of their taxes off of their tax bill or something like that in a reciprocal volunteer way, when we have the increased need to have a first responder that's maybe a retired
They're not
person.
trained the same way.
So, okay, so
Yeah.
that's why I
Pre-hospital
said
care
not
is
to
a different-
minimize that, but I'm
different
trying to,
training.
trying to
Yeah, no,
utilize.
There are lots of
trying to-
challenges with that, a number of different challenges.
Okay,
And it would take a while to work through those, including some
tax,
town policy, taxation issues,
Yeah.
and
Also liability
Yeah.
and,
yeah, okay, I just,
yeah, pre-hospital care is a completely different
But
training.
you've heard him talk. It's going to take creative ideas.
Yeah.
Well, that's-
We're going to have to be thinking,
Yeah,
how do we address this? We don't have the younger kids coming up into the call forces and into the firefighting departments, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure my question is quick enough that we should like not get into the budget.
Let's
Maybe
get-
it'll be a follow-up to
maybe
this
we'll
discussion.
have you in for a little
I'm more than happy to.
creative
Yeah,
thought process on a less, when
And
we're
not in a
not,
budget.
when we're not in a budget cycle.
More than happy to do that.
So let's talk about the budget. I'm assuming that, I'm not assuming, I'm asking you whether the big increase on the personnel end, is that anticipating the new contracts?
That's broken down, and I did have it for the other night, but I don't have it now, but I can recite most of it off of memory,
Fine.
okay?
Yep.
So if you look at the full-time
Yeah,
chunk, I think that's what you're referring to. A good part of that is, when we transition some of that money from the call force to the full-time salary, so we see S&W full-time.
right.
So that is roughly about, I'm going off of memory now, probably around $40,000 to $45,000.
But that should have been a wash with a,
Well, yes and no, because what we did is we still maintained, again, that's those stipends for up to 11 call people instead of dropping it down to 9. Because in my heart of hearts and my hopes of hopes, I would hope that 2 call people would come along and want to go on stipend when we can utilize them and compel them to respond. So I've kept that money there, hoping that would happen. So if someone came along, we'd be able to compensate them. The other thing that we have to change is, though, is if you recall, this year we added a new lieutenant's position.
right.
So that was an increase of about $20,000 in overtime costs and training costs and full-time salary costs. And then we also increased our administrative assistant to a 40-hour work week out of 35. And then also there's some money figured in there, I think partially for my new contract, because my contract's up next month. And then there's some carryover to July 1. So that would, take up a lot of that A1 line item, I guess is where I'm going with that.
Right, okay. Because it's about a $71,000 difference, and it's all in
Yeah.
it's all in personnel. So I just wanted, I just wanted to check and make sure that was all in line. So that is not taking into account anything for the new contract because it's such a big unknown.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
Everything else is pretty much either level funded or the same, or within
Yeah,
a couple
pretty
$1,000s. Again, I'm talking about the A1 through A14 line items, as salary and wages or personnel.
Right. And the operating expenses are not a big.
Yeah, I think
and
we're,
those vary so much. I mean, a lot of it's money allocated doesn't get spent. But those are small numbers compared to the personnel.
yeah, as a matter of fact, if you look even medical supplies, we've gone down by about, over the last 2 years, we've dropped that by about $7,000.
How do you do that?
Well, you know, how we've done that is we found a better competitive buying plan.
Ah.
To his credit, Lieutenant Sean Clark, our EMS officer, has scoured the nation to find better pricing for the same type of drugs and supplies. And he's done a very good job at it.
All
So you
right.
don't go to the border and.
Well, no, it's all with the United States of America, and it's all approved by
It's all FDA.
OEMS and Department of Public Health.
And within its expiration date.
Yeah. Well, but that's the other thing, you know, we laugh because we've also been able to change some of our medications so that by refrigerating them, the expiration date is longer.
30 days to 2 years.
Is longer, so then we're not replacing some of those more expensive medications as frequently
Good.
as we have in the past.
Nice.
Ignore those best used by dates.
No, we still go by those.
No, if you buy a vial. If you buy a vial of insulin, they tell you it's got a 30-day shelf life, but the expiration date on the package is 2 years out. Because
I'm an
they're-
insulin user, I'm well aware,
Right, that's right.
but
I only get it for my cat, so, but I keep it refrigerated,
as you should.
as you should.
Cameron's
Anyway,
here.
well, good for Lieutenant Clark.
Refrigerating a cat, that's
Yeah.
I'm
cat
still on
shots.
edibles is not for amateurs.
Rule of thumb,
I like that.
just bite the head off the gummy bear and wait an hour.
Who can eat one gummy bear?
I don't even like gummy bears. All right, so,
I'm so glad I'm in this seat right
On my camera, thank you.
does anybody have any additional questions?
Can I just sort of pose a question for the future?
Absolutely.
Because it relates to something that Jan and I were talking about at the end of the last meeting, which relates back to something, in my working life, in the technology world, there's a concept called total cost of ownership. And it actually was originated by a friend of mine who back in the 80s said, you know, when you buy a PC, the actual cost of the PC is only about 20% of the actual cost that's going to accrue in terms of operation, support, maintenance, training, whatever. So what you're really spending is this much when you think you're only spending that much. So over the years, that's gotten applied to all kinds of things, including, you know, life. You know, you hire somebody, but you've got OPEB out to the horizon and so on. So we were talking about the fact that it seems like we have this kind of conversation every year about we're losing some to Eastham, you know, people are leaving the Cape, and this is like not just confined to the fire department, it's confined to all kinds of places, but it raises the question in my mind of what is sort of an appropriate total cost of ownership for Wellfleet of a fire department. If you had, I were asked before, if you had your druther, or somebody did, if you had your druthers, what do you want? Taking a half step back from that, if you just look at Wellfleet and you project Wellfleet forward, say 5 to 10 years, think about, as best you can, all the variables that are affecting demographics here, summer traffic, the bell curve of need, I assume for EMS stuff in the summer, and so on. If you could design your perfect fire department for Wellfleet would be the start. But then, what would it actually cost us to keep that fire department intact? How much sweetener do we have to apply to stop people from leaving, or to attract people to stay here, even though we don't have as much action and all of that, but just so we could have a stable, not annual thing of we lost 2, we need 1, or we should be hiring 1 a year for the next 4 years, which is a way to go for sure, if that's the strategy. But how should we be thinking about the future of the fire department strategically in terms of what do we need and how do we keep it that way?
Well, I guess all I can offer, Fred, on that is, you know, we deal with 3-year employment contracts, and the funding, or what the town administrator and I, and when we look at these contracts and, you know, negotiate is, okay, so what's the cost of a firefighter paramedic full-time salary? We'll just go with salary. You know, what's Eastham paying? What's Orleans paying? What's Harwich paying? You know, those are who I call the comparables. It's not the Hyannis of the world. It's not the, perhaps the sandwiches or, or the mashed peas or the other side of the Cape. But those outer Cape departments, that, well, we're probably as close to Eastham as anyone, even though they're a little bigger as we've talked about, but it's the outer Cape. So we look at that salary, we project that out for 3, or if we can project for 5 or 6 years in terms of an estimate. Healthcare, all we have to look at there is what it's cost us in history and behind, past, to try to give you an idea what that would be for health insurance. The real tough one from my perspective, and Dan would probably be able to answer this better than I can because he's more of the numbers guy. But as you said, the OPEB and the pension costs, and the actuarials. That one I'd really have to give that some serious thought, and I don't know if I could come up with a real number that was, I'd give you a guess, but that would be based upon a guess,
I mean, we don't need you to do this tonight, but if you could give it some thought, like, just keep a piece of paper or
Some
something.
working notes.
That you can keep some notes on, and we'll talk, and let's talk about this in 2 months or something. And
I think this is one of those things where you don't have to be right. No, I'm serious. It's like your best guess is better probably than anyone else's. Do we need to offer 10% more than Eastham in salary and benefits in order to get people to leave Eastham or not go to Eastham and come here? I hate to get into this notion that we're going to be competing and driving the price up all over, but if in fact we are not competitive, what is parity competitive, or should we be a little bit better than parity in order to be competitive because we are Wellfleet and not Eastham? I have no idea, but I'm guessing maybe you have a feel for it because you talk to the people who leave and they say, well, I got no social life here, or there's nobody to meet, or there's nothing to do in January, or whatever. And how do you offset the relative lack of stuff that there is to do in January in Wellfleet with an incentive? What would that incentive be? Cheaper housing, more salary, a party? I have no idea.
Out of the box ideas. What can we do? Can we do a firefighter exchange with a bigger town for 6 months? If somebody if somebody wants to go experience a different department, can we? Is there
A reality show.
I'm retired.
I don't know.
It's no question. It's a huge challenge, and it's as the chief said, it's a challenge for bigger organizations, bigger departments that have more activity, that pay a little better, that just have more opportunities, and that's even more compounded by the smaller organizations in size. I'm not trying to be. I'm just I see it as a reality, in terms of what we face on the Outer Cape.
Is there something we can do that might offset the attraction of more action? Is there something we can do as far as?
There's so many. It's personal because it happens. Is what I find is that it comes down to your spouse. It comes down to what they want, how you want. I was just talking with a young gentleman who used to work with us, now worked in Brewster. Just bought a house, went big into buying the house. He lives down the road from me. And his fiance, who he thought was all of a sudden she said, Cape Cod ain't the place for me. And went down to sunny Florida. And he's like, so he had one of two choices. Do I chase her down to Florida? Is that my heart? Or he decided his heart's staying here with his dog and
Right, but they weren't married. And once they're married,
it's hard. We had a gentleman who I thought we'd have here forever. I thought it worked out perfect. His dad was a retired from Truro. He interned with us. He's with us. I got him in here. We finally get him out of the academy and everything. And his fiance says, I really want to be a nurse in Boston. Really? And up and off to the South Shore, he went.
Because your skills are necessary everywhere, so they're
Everywhere.
transferable, so it's going to depend
so-
on what.
And if your spouse can't get a
And
job
if there's a
here,
specific, for the spouse, then they're gonna go.
And if you don't like
Yeah.
it, I remember when Rosenthal came on board, and the big concern was like, New York City? How is he gonna like? And then I was concerned is, how are we gonna handle those spouses? How's she gonna like it? I remember, we had a town administrator, rolled into town on Friday, spent one night in our rental, and there was a voicemail message on Monday that she wasn't taking the job and she went back up to Maine.
Okay, I just have to tell this is a 30-second story.
And you know something? Good riddance.
But
She didn't get it. She didn't get it.
But she'd taken the job. So the personalities, that's
Yeah.
the hardest thing, is I can't put
Yeah,
a dollar, and so I don't wanna promise you something, or I hate to say, if I do this, we're good, because it's such a personal,
yeah.
And from the FinCom perspective, it's not like we're saying we have any control over that,
Right.
or that we're even trying to set policy. It's not.
No,
It's more like we're trying to get a picture of what
So
the
it's not,
costs are
so the
likely to
answer is
be.
it's not completely economic.
Right.
Well, sure.
It's a community and,
Yeah.
and it's not completely
You gotta make sure you sell the
Yeah.
schools.
Which I just learned. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
there's so much that happens to the whole thing, it's just,
Yeah.
it's tough.
It is.
so this is a 20-second story, I swear. Like 40 years ago, we were living in the country. We had moved out of New York City. We had a good friend who was a comic, and like one of those like a Kevin Hart type comic, very hyper. And he broke up with his wife and decided he was going to come to the country and commune with nature for a few days because he just needed to clear his head. Brought his pillow, put him in the bedroom. It was June, crickets outside. He came storming out of the bedroom in the middle of the night and said, "I can't stand the crickets! I can't stand the silence!" He was on the bus back to the city.
Couldn't even take it for 3 days,
He
huh?
could take for 3 hours.
Funny.
One of the things, and I know you want to wrap this up, but one of the things that I'm looking at right now is I'm thinking, it's so difficult to find people. Even when you've got an opening, it's difficult to find people. So we really kind of have to judge right now. We've got 2 people that really could join the fire force once they get out of the academy.
We're gonna lose them.
Yeah,
I know
and
we're gonna lose
them, and it's like
I
we
will
gotta
make
figure
any
out.
wager bet that we're gonna lose these 2 people because,
If we can't fund those positions
Yeah.
before they get out of
yeah.
their training, yeah.
I've already got one chief calling me and I'm saying, if you want to maintain our long professional friendship, you better give me 6 months. I said, I need 6 months to figure this out.
Okay.
And he has backed off because, and again, no one's guaranteed a job, but, you hear about the Wellfleet Way, and I moved here and been very happy as in Wash Ashore.
As a citizen.
Okay, and so, this has appealed to me, this place,
Right.
this lifestyle.
Right.
And we have some young people who want to work in Wellfleet. One is a resident, one lives in Northeastham. They want to work in Wellfleet because they started here as call members. They have friendships here. They have mutual respect. They know the system. They have a comfort level, but they also know that they're going to get supported in how we can grow them into their things that they want to specialize in. Mm-hmm. And that's the not only my philosophy, but that is the environment that I've worked hard to build. Danny worked hard to build, Chief Silverman, that we really worked hard to build that. And, it would just be a real shame if we can't maintain those folks that really want to be here and would just serve the town probably their whole careers. And that's unheard of.
No, it's hard nowadays.
That's my pitch.
All right.
Okay. That's good.
We hear you.
Okay?
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
We will be having more discussions about this and including, it's a really serious issue, so. we need to-
And what Fred said, I think is, and the chief and I have talked about it, is putting together a plan and a budget of what we need to do,
Right.
where we need to be.
Yeah.
And start bringing that forward to you and to the select board and
Yeah.
to the public and letting them know, this isn't an area where we can gamble.
Sometimes.
if we miss-
And where it doesn't feel like a year-to-year reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
reactive,
Where there's
yeah.
really a 3, 4,
Oh
5 year
God,
plan.
they're back again?
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fiscally prudent thing to do is not always to save the money.
No, that's what you're.
No, that's,
spending
yeah,
money
no.
on.
Yeah.
That's why you're.
Especially if we can, yeah, especially if there's people that you have that are, you know, committed to a long term, and if you're, you know, if you're managing your department as you have been and managing people, and you have a sense that, you know, these people would be willing to stay if X, Y, Z happened, then I think it's fiscally responsible for us to make X, Y, Z happen some way or another.
And that what's only strengthens that is we're gonna lose them anyway, because they're active members of the call force, so that even compounds
So that-
the problem.
So, yeah,
Not, you know, we've lost 2 call people, but now we've lost,
potentially
Potentially-
two full-time people.
yeah, so,
Right.
And nobody's
So-
beating the door down.
We
exactly.
need to seriously get on the stick here. Okay. Well, thank you.
Well, I'm sorry I took up so much of your time.
No,
No,
good.
that's why I didn't want to bring in a third department head tonight. I wanted to be able to take the time tonight to discuss with the two of you what was going on, because you are two of the biggest departments and with serious concerns.
So when is your roast?
No party.
Nope. Oh, you didn't want a party?
I'm not.
He's not gonna deny me that opportunity. It's a road trip.
Have without me. Tell me how it went. Someone else called me today about it. I said, it's not my, I'm simple. You can come up, get a cup of coffee and things like that. I haven't planned anything.
Yawn.
All right, but I'm the same boring
So
person.
in other words, we're gonna have to plan it and just get you here somehow.
Yeah.
You want Chinese food?
Chinese food, you get a cup of coffee and things like that, that's all.
I don't know where you're gonna get
Oh,
it.
there's actually 2 good takeout places up Cape.
Oh, up Cape.
Yeah, not
Because
around
that's no
here.
damn good.
Is your heart okay?
My heart's good.
Yeah, good, because you ever see the movie Get Shorty?
Yeah.
Where, I forget the mobster's name in the beginning, he's coming up the stairs and goes, I don't like surprises. He opens the door and everybody knows, he goes, surprise. He drives it.
We can have coffee when I head out and things like that and whatever, but it's.
All right, we've got a little bit more business to cover tonight,
right.
so.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate
Good night.
it. Thanks again.
Good night. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All
can I
right.
give you this back? I was remiss in not feeding my nut last.
If you don't have it by next Wednesday,
I'll
I'll bring
bring it to
it,
you.
we'll bring it to you.
I will, I asked Ken to go, yeah.
Just-
I'll have it, you know what, I'll get it Friday.
Rebecca has it in her office.
Ken came by, but you were out doing something.
So, I just wanted to make sure everybody got a copy. I know everybody got a notice of the meeting that Janet wants to hold. It's
When was that?
the,
The 20
next Wednesday, I think it
It's
is.
the 23rd.
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah, it's a week from
afternoon.
today from 2 to 4.
And I can commit to being there. I know that most of you won't be able to. If anybody is, that would be great. And I still haven't gotten the answer to your question, Fred, because I haven't had a chance to talk to Janet Reinhardt. But this is what she wants to cover. So anybody, I'm gonna ask that anybody who can be there, please do, just to back me up. And, I mean, this is, as far as I know, only the second meeting she's had in the course of a year. I mean, it's been almost a year since the last one, so this is not likely to become a frequent activity. And if it is, it's going to have to change times, because
Yeah, 2 to 4 is.
most people can't make it, and most of our committee can't make it in the middle of the day.
You know, the time was set sort of because what Janet said is, well, I want to make sure the department heads get there and that they
Right.
don't have to come in after
Right.
work. So we got to find that balance sort of there.
So,
But-
I mean,
but-
she's not gonna get a quorum of the finance committee, but I'm hoping that at least 2 other people will be
Okay.
able to come.
Okay.
If I can rearrange, I did my schedule for next week, but I don't see it in my brain, but I am short-staffed as well. And
I would have been shocked if you'd been able to come, because I know that you're working. And-
Can I ask my question of Dan? See if he might know the answer?
Absolutely.
So the question I had for Janet about this, when I saw this, was it's a fairly aggressive agenda.
Mhm.
A lot of territory to cover in
Uh-huh.
2 hours. Is it your understanding that this is the beginning of a series of meetings?
Yes.
It's
The
the second.
The agenda
it's the
that's in front of
second
you
series.
is very similar to the agenda that was, I think it was last June when she had this one, the first one.
Yeah.
She really wants us to
I don't mean an
just,
annual series of meetings, I
Yep.
mean like maybe monthly.
it may get to that point, although it will depend on sort of like what the specific issue is, you know, and we may create smaller groups that could work on an issue if we were gonna meet monthly, just because some people may only be able to meet in the evening, and some people maybe only be able to meet in the day, so, but it is a fairly aggressive But she just wants us to start thinking kind of as a group about what the future of Wellfleet holds.
Did she not read our report?
Is there no, can I ask you, Craig, do we no longer have a comprehensive plan?
The comprehensive plan group is about to reconvene and work on that. So it's the same thing, but well, I wouldn't say it's the same thing, it's a little bit different from that, but the comprehensive plan working group to bring forward a new comprehensive plan is going to recreate itself and continue with the process. I would expect that will be brought forward probably in April of 2020 for the annual town meeting.
All right.
I'm sorry, one other question. I don't see the whole issue of dredging anywhere on the agenda. Is that because it's being treated as a separate thing?
I would say yes. The select board just voted to create a dredging committee and assigned them charges last night. So they're now accepting applications for people who want to serve on the dredging committee. But it's like, that's like a complete separate focus of trying to get that moving forward.
Okay, so please, anybody who is gonna be in town next Wednesday from 2 to 4, I know it's a lot with the finance committee meeting that night. This was scheduled afterwards. Such is life. But yeah, if I could get a couple more people there, that'd be great. Fred, can we say that we've covered strategic planning for tonight, or is there something that you want to deal with?
The only thing I would say is I sent out the
Yeah.
forms, whatever. I assume people are, going to do whatever they do with them. So yeah, we're not near having to put this year's version of the report together. Probably not till late February, early
Yeah,
March.
Yeah, something
maybe.
like that. And it's not gonna be, we're not gonna be starting from scratch.
No, it will be mostly updating, a lot of it will be updating stuff from last year. But I think off tonight's conversation, there may be a more extensive fire department or
Yes.
whatever
Yeah, we're gonna
section
have to, yeah,
projecting costs
but
forward.
I can work on that with you.
Yeah.
We got a very nice memo, which I don't know if anybody read, from Bob about the shellfish department. As far as liaison reports, I failed to ask Rebecca to print it out, so we can cover that.
I actually have it if you want.
Well, I was
I
saying,
think
let's
I printed
let's
it.
cover it next week.
Okay.
Let's see, so next week, the only department we have confirmed is shellfish, so we will have time to deal with that. Yeah, we can deal with that then and there.
Okay, yeah. I'll let
So
her-
everybody
I just-
please try to just read it. And we'll have hard copies at the next meeting. Are there any other liaison reports?
I had mine that I kind of phoned in last time, just from Harry that, for the building needs, that he said there's nothing of note on the building needs at this point that looks strategic. But he did mention, the dredging and the school budgets as his overall focus on Wellfleet is, more, is larger than the building needs committee. So nothing specific on the building needs, but he does have concern for the upcoming dredging and the school budgets, which are being handled separately.
I will piggyback on that. I'm meeting with Tom Conrad and Mary Beth next week, so
Excellent.
I'll have updated information by then, I think.
All right. There's no correspondence. For some reason, we don't seem to be getting the beacon anymore.
Oh, I'm so sad. So bummed.
You're not looking for a municipal job?
So,
Look at that.
can
Well,
we,
that's the best
can we
thing about
dispense
it.
with the minutes?
So
Last
moved.
meeting.
I moved the
my
minutes.
name's spelled.
Okay, it'll be so long.
Did you move? I'll second.
I moved the minutes of 7:18.
All right.
I would second.
I wasn't here, so.
You can vote for them if you read them.
Second for
I did, I already seconded.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor?
When you got the beacon, was it addressed to each of you individually? or
No,
No.
to the
just
finance
to the
committee?
FinCom, Bob.
Yeah, there were usually a couple copies.
Okay. I'll find
Don't
out.
sweat it, don't sweat it, don't sweat
I
it.
was just noting the absence.
Don't sweat it.
I mean, I
Kathy,
know,
I'll forward you my copy.
That's the least of my.
We don't get much
So,
correspondence, so
I
it's very humbling.
have an item on other business, and that is that we, that I actually looked at the audit report, the summary. And it seems that we have some unspent funds. I assume you know about this.
Which ones are you talking about?
They listed off several years of multiple thousands of dollars of money that we have gotten from the state that if we don't spend it could be,
You know what, let me look that up so that I can prepare to talk about it at our next meeting, so, yeah.
excellent. Because if we do in fact have this money kicking around, the other thing I need you to answer for me is what are the restrictions on spending it? What can we or can we not spend it on?
Okay. The one I do know about is Chapter 90 funds.
That might be it,
Yeah, and
That's
DPW has
specific
a plan for them
okay?
because they need to redo Lieutenant Island Road, the road going out
Yeah.
to, so they've been saving up the Chapter 90 funds so that they'll be able to pay for it almost
I see.
all
Okay,
exclusively.
I think that's what it is.
I think it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think, yeah, because it was specific to state issued funds.
Yes,
So, okay, that's fine. Yeah, and their only other concern was something that's gonna be an ongoing issue, so there was nothing specific that needed to be addressed with any department, which is good.
Yeah,
Because in
yeah.
the past, we've had that happening, so glad to see that. All right, does anybody else have other business?
Generic question, has anything changed or is anything changing or moving on the Kendrick Avenue property? Is there still a plan to try to acquire it?
There is still the intent to bring something forward to April town meeting. So the process now is that I have asked some staff members to come up with an idea of at least 2 different plans of if we're buying this plan, what would we do, if property, what would we do with it? And then the other part of that is myself and the select board chair meeting with the current owners of the property to discuss what they want from the property. And then the executive session for the select board, where the select board would say, actually, how much are we willing to pay for the property, so.
So if any of those plans want to put forward an article on
Yep,
warrant,
yep.
would you tell the originators that they will need to come pitch it to the finance
Sure,
committee?
sure.
In person?
Yep.
And that they should call Rebecca for a slot on our
Yep.
agenda? And that no pitchy, no votey.
You know, it's a lit, you know, there isn't a plan out there that we
I
say,
know.
oh, we really have to have this property and we need it because of this. So we're kind of coming at it the backwards way of people have decided that, oh, we really need this property. So
That's
now
fine.
we're coming at it and saying, okay, what would we do? Why would we buy this property if we're gonna buy it?
Or alternately, if we had $1 million to spend, what could we do with the fire department?
I don't,
Yeah,
I
Just-
don't, right.
just
Now,
saying.
That's, and I think that's what the, going back to the vote, the vote before, it kind of was like, you're looking at this problem that needs some money thrown at it to be solved, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of other ways to solve it other than to throw some money at it, and
And it seems
what's the
like
best use of the funds,
It
so.
seems like a pretty solid investment to put
To
it into
put
the
it
fire
in,
department rather than this property that nobody knows what to do with. It would be nice to own it, but okay.
Schedule-wise, so next week we're gonna be going through with shellfish, and then the following week.
The following week, we have recreation and hopefully the harbor master and the DPW, neither of whom have confirmed.
Okay, and then when's our next meeting, after this
A
marathon?
week after that. Oh, so we have meetings on board for the next 2 weeks and then,
February 13th.
February
Valentine's Day?
13th.
13th.
Yeah, I'll be away for that, but, okay,
Oh, no, yeah,
Doing
13th.
something fun?
I hope so.
So 23rd, 30th, and
So we'll get a couple weeks off.
13.
Will you follow up with Harbor Master and DPW just to confirm that they're gonna be there?
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
23rd, 30th, and the 13th, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
We're
that's,
either me or Ken will be by on Friday to grab mine.
Sure,
Oh.
that's fine, I'll be there.
Thank you.
If I'm not, I'll just put it in the slot for you.
Okay,
It's just too.
thank you.
Yeah, I've got to come by too, so.
Yeah, I'll put them right in the slot for you tomorrow.
all right, does anybody have anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Sure. Wow.
So,
Second, third, and fourth.
all those in favor?
Aye.